what God has done in the 5 years that we started this idea. And I think to be able to share this within church and often the Christian audiences is something that really sort of touches my heart. 5 years ago, it was the best of times and the worst of times. I was finishing my MD PhD training at John Hopkins. I was in the world famous lab doing cutting edge cancer research. And it was amazing. But on the other end, when I was in the wards as a medical student, I really didn't enjoy the things of medicine as much, so I sort of goofed off a bit. During the medical training, in order for you to enter into the next phase, which is called residency, to train in a hospital, there's a process called match. So you put in your top lists of what you want to do, where you want to go, and then the schools sort of put in who they want, their top people. It's sort of, for if you're from Taiwan, so you put in that, and for the ones that do very, very well, schools will tell you if they only have 5 spots, right, or 10 spots, and if you're in the top 5 or top 10, they'll write you a letter that says you're ranked to match. Basically, if you choose us, we like you so much, you're in our top 5 or top 10. If you choose us, we'll choose you. So for me, it was pretty amazing. I got, because of sort of God's grace and the research I was doing, many of the top hospitals, in the U.S., wrote letters to me and ranked to match, and I was like, wow, this is pretty amazing to be doing that. But a few weeks before the actual match, which happens in March, I get a email from one of the Harvard hospitals telling me, Jimmy, we want to list you in the match, but we don't see you there. What's wrong? So I go back and talk. And partly my fault of sort of goofing off, in the medical training, and partly there was some sort of injustice. They removed me, they failed me from one of my courses, and took me off the match. And it was like, what? I am, set to go to any medical school I want, and at that moment, I couldn't go to any. And that was one of the times when sort of I cried to God, God, what are you trying to teach me? What do you have in store for me? I thought I did all this for you. What do I do? What's going on? And there was a lot of time of cleansing and repentance. Right? I was very prideful at the time, thinking, wow, I did this awesome thing. I can go anywhere I want. I sort of blew off some of my classes, and there was, God was like, you know what, I give and I take, right? So really thinking about Job's, right? Continue to sort of bless God during that time. Little did I know that set off the trajectory of my life to now. I ended up never doing residency and pursuing a whole new different path, which I'll tell you a little bit about. One of the things that happened was I met a young boy with a rare genetic disease. We've done some of the sort of early research in cancer and thought, oh, can we use this to help this little boy? When people sort of hear this in general context, not within the church, they just see I met some people and we created this institute and it was a success. But the backstory is I brought together a group of believers. I received a fellowship from the what's called the Harvey Fellows. It's a little full-ride scholarship for graduate school. And a bunch of us got together and we were thinking, what can we do to help children like this? So there was a group of 4 of us, 3 were believers, and started to pray. Started to think about what we can do. And we created this Rare Genomics Institute, which 5 years later, we're in 7 countries with a staff of about 150. We help hundreds of children every year. And now looking back, right, it was amazing that out of sort of this time of severe darkness, I didn't know what to do, that this opportunity came. If I went that normal path down the physician, all these things that happened, would not have been sort of impossible. So today, what do? So Rare Genomics is a nonprofit, as you see some of these stories. And another cool story, you see one of the first people in that video is the Berry family. very, very devout Christians. And the mother, Rita, actually their child was sick, and for a period of time didn't know what was wrong, and prayed and prayed and prayed, and was able to find this random article. I think maybe is this the way to cure it? Was able to figure out what was wrong with doctors. That was the first phase, but then fell into problems again, and through genome sequencing was eventually sort of come out. And for them to be sort of walking and sharing their journey about how God was able to use them, and for us to be connected, and then the husband also sits on our board, another sort of testament of sort of God's working throughout sort of this whole process. So that's just a snippet. So what I want to do today is sort of give you sort of broad strokes of ways that God has sort of done amazing things. And as I was sort of preparing this, I was pretty amazed of ways that God has sort of used this guy who didn't even make it to residency, who was too proud to show up to stuff, and the journey that he's brought me on. I always have a caveat when I sort of listen to testimonies. There's two caveats. Usually when I hear testimony, I usually don't tell mostly the highlights, which actually we'll tell about today. Because I think, everybody sort of talks about highlights and things like, wow, this is an amazing thing. So, but I think we want to, God is continually faithful, actually even more in the low lights of our life, in the times of darkness where God shines out most. So that want to be caveat, like this testimony is not just sort of sharing the highlights, but how God also works through our low lights. And secondly, there's also a danger, and I fall into it a lot as well, is that it's sort of a showing off of what I have done, and that's completely false. And sort of check me on that. That truly that this is sort of what God has done through sort of a broken medical student and on this sort of journey. Today I work at a company called Natera. We do cancer diagnostics, and we're hoping to be able to detect cancer years and years before ways we can do it now. Faster, earlier than mammography, faster than any screening method, PSA, so excited to work there. So good, so let's jump into that. First, I just want to give a little bit of background about sort of how I'm thinking about this. The title is Symphonic Doxology. Doxology is sort of the praise of God. And I really think about the word symphony. We all praise God in what we do in our everyday life. Whether we do science, whether we're in the office, whether we're an engineer, we all play our different instruments. And coming together, I think what I sort of look out to you guys, we all play your different roles in praising God, and we come together as church, as a symphony. So that is really sort of a lot of how I think about the church and how we worship God in all of life. I know this is a missions conference, but I really want to sort of emphasize that this is a very famous John Piper quote. It talks about mission exists because worship doesn't. Right? Missions. We do missions just so that more people can worship God, and that's the ultimate goal. And hopefully we'll sort of think about that. So where does this all start off with? Thinking about our work and vocation. It starts off in Genesis, the cultural mandate, where God told Adam and Eve pre-fall, before any sin, that they're going to take care of the garden. Right? They're going to have dominion over the animals and take care. So work is something that God has called us as humans to do prior to sin. I often joke that, well, I never became a real doctor, but if I did become a real doctor, and I have my scientist, my MD, my PhD, and Lord willing, I end up in heaven, my doctor's side will be out of a job, right? No sickness. I think many of you who are physicians, unfortunately, you'll be unemployed in heaven, which is a good thing. But as a scientist, I always will have a job. Because sort of exploring God's world and praising God through His inventions, through His creation is amazing, right? So you could almost say that Adam's first job was to name animals, which is taxonomy. So Adam was first a scientist before anything else. And as we think about missions, I also want to think about the Great Commandment in relation to the Great Commission. So we are called to go to the ends of the earth to sort of proclaim the good news. Because, secondarily to our dual calls of love of God and others. So too is that when we do evangelism and when we do outreach, our first and foremost calling is to love God and the other person first before sort of thinking about that. And this is going to be important because I'm going to talk about the different ways that God has worked in my life to be able to love people, but not necessarily loving people may not be, giving them a tract, although that's very, very important. So I just want to help us think through that as well. And ultimately, any of us, and this is the most important part is in terms of missions and evangelism, is I think a lot about the woman at the well. Right? She talked to Jesus, and then right after she, Jesus talked about her husbands and everything and worship at different mountains, she ran over and started to tell people about Jesus, and so her life was transformed and became a missionary on the spot. And because Christ has loved us so much, has given us so much that we are overfilling with His love, and that's why we do all that we do, whether it's loving God and others, whether it's our outreach. And ultimately, I really want to think about sort of our lives as stewardship. God has given us different things. And some people who are, for me, I'm sort of given the ability of being sort of nerddom. I'm very good at learning. So that's sort of my secret superpower. But for others, right, like for people who are very good at sports, right, they can witness that way, or people who are good at engineering. So how do we become a good steward of what God has given us? And ultimately, this famous passage in Romans 12:1, to be a living sacrifice. And this is often like, living sacrifice. There's people talk about, what's the worst part about a living sacrifice? Like, it cross off the altar, right? Most sacrifices are dead, right? But we're called to be a living sacrifice because Christ first sacrificed Himself for us. So ultimately, with that sort of background, that all these things that we do, hopefully, is sort of pursuit of God's glory in all the world. So I'm going to sort of think about this, and this is a very famous theologian and Prime Minister, Abraham Kuyper. Have people heard of Abraham Kuyper? Some have, yes. Abraham Kuyper was a theologian. He loved God a lot, but he also was Prime Minister and was able to do some amazing things. And one of his famous quotes, he says, "There's not one square inch in all the universe that does not cry out that Christ is not sovereign over, and that Christ does not say mine." Meaning Christ is sovereign over every single molecule of the universe, every single place in Silicon Valley, every single place in Taiwan. Christ is sovereign over all, and our work is to be able to be stewards and seeing Christ being sovereign there. And we'll be able to sort of see that. So I'm going to do a quick thing. I chose 7 areas where I feel that God has shown Himself, and this being a missionary conference, and truly to bear witness of God's word there. So first, medical missions. Some of you have done amazing work, and because I never became a real doctor, I was like, man, I thought my life would include some sort of going overseas and be able to sort of, I also have training in linguistics, and I wanted to learn how to fly a plane so I could fly a plane to a rural place, learn the language, translate the Gospels into the language, and hear the people had this super power woman. It was almost sort of wanting that myself to be cool, kind of this sort of romanticized view of missionary work. So I'm always like, what would missionary work sort of be like? And even in my medical training, I was sort of not sort of as you heard, not the brightest sheep in the flock. And I come from a very medical family, and actually my parents are not believers and actually very antagonistic in my faith. And the 2 biggest disappointments of my parents and for me is, number 1, that I'm a believer, and it's this is being recorded. So I won't say, but it's hard for those of you who have parents. And I'm the eldest son of the eldest son, so I'm the one that's supposed to sort of carry on the family line. So that's a big disappointment. And if that were not enough, and I grew up medical, both my parents were doctors, on my cousins and my sibling, every single Type A medical school, I had a cousin or a sibling in. one time. Every single one, I had 2 at Taida, 1 at, actually 2 at Beii, even like Bofang. So this is how medical my family was. And for me to like get an MD and not practice was like blasphemy, right? So those are the 2 big things, is I'm not only I'm a Christian, but I'm not sort of practicing medicine. But I was thinking, God, what are ways that, even though that I don't have medical training in terms of residency, are ways that I can be served. So I'm part of the Christian Medical and Dental Association. And one of the places that they sent me was to Mongolia. And like Mongolia. So it turns out that a lot of sort of developing countries are not only looking for doctors, but looking for scientists who can teach them the latest technology that they're trying to advance. So I've been to places, so Mongolia, even advanced places like Denmark, to Egypt, where all these people who are wanting to learn the latest technologies, which I have knowledge of, then that became my Roman citizenship, to be able to go and be able to share that. So I think it's sort of, I'm very thankful for God that even though I didn't sort of complete my medical training, I've been able to accompany medical teams and teach at medical schools, teach at national academies, and think about ways that God can be glorified. And specifically for Mongolia, what was interesting is that a lot of missionaries have been trying to do a lot of evangelistic work to the doctors, but Christians are thought to be uneducated, foreign, and it was interesting. Like once I landed, they like filled my whole schedule. Oh, you need to meet this doctor, you need to meet that doctor, to like prove that Christians aren't just sort of ignorant, unscientific, irrational sort of mumbo jumbo believing people. That scientists can also be Christian. So that's sort of one way. This is sort of standard medical missions there. Another way that has been sort of God's used me in terms of thinking about is evangelism, and specifically thinking about Paul in Acts 17, speaking to Athens, and actually didn't share. So I also have ministry training. I get to drop out. So I attended Reformed Theological Seminary for a couple of years, and then I almost finished, and I got married and had kids, and didn't finish my degree. But I learned all the necessary things. I continue to still learn. But I think one of the things that Paul does in Acts 17 is be able to address the Greeks talking about the unknown God, right? You don't know. So in that sense, they wanted often someone that be able to sort of engage them at a sort of a certain level. And because of that, because of, again, my academic training, universities and Christian groups have sort of invited me to be able to sort of do that. I don't know if people have heard of the Veritas Forum. So for example, so spoke at multiple Veritas forums, and the cool thing is that even at the highest places where people thinking that at the Harvards and Yales where people are like, oh, science, you don't believe in that, but you know what, having someone with enough sort of training and who also is a person of faith, people are interested. It's like, oh really? So I've talked with and spoken with professors at top universities who are non-believers, and having these sort of dialogue about these sort of questions of life, and thinking about what are sort of the important things beyond just science, and what is the background of science? Epistemology, is there a foundation of that? Or even on and this is pretty amazing, this is sort of training forum, this is based in Washington DC area, so you have people like White House staff, people in the Senate, people come, again, in the hall of power. Again, having someone, my Roman citizenship is my training, then people are sort of willing to come, talking about this one, particularly talking about human dignity in this area of advanced sciences, and also about sort of bioethics. So the training has been opening sort of doors there, but I think what's even cooler, because those are explicitly evangelistic events, is sort of what I talk about sort of saltiness in this whole world. Is sort of subversive, undercover kind of events that people aren't even sort of thinking it's not a Christian event, and be able to do that. One of the things is I'm do a lot of stuff with an organization called TED. And they have a sort of gathering of top thinkers around the world that gather once or twice a year to think about these things. And when I was invited, I'm like, wow, that's pretty amazing, and think about what God can do. And this is pretty cool, that we were able to organize a Christian prayer breakfast at TED. And that's gone for 4 years now in a row. So you have people like, Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg hasn't gone. Al Gore, right, having their own things, but then we gathered all the believers who are, again, in the house of power to think about, God, you've blessed us with so much, how can we be good stewards of that, and be able to sort of make impact for you there. So I'm excited to tell you, for example, that this is not very public, but some of the leaders at top companies, like Google, for example, are very strong believers, and Microsoft. And you might not hear them in sort of the public square, but God has His people in all these top places placed strategically already. Sometimes we think about the Old Testament is easy, like, oh, I'm the only one left, right? But God has amazing good place all over the place there. And then another sort of pretty amazing conference is the Aspen Ideas Festival, where if you go there, you have people like Richard Dawkins speaking and Sam Harris, right? And often there's not very much sort of a Christian voice, and being placed in those areas, sometimes I feel like I'm Ruth, but an ugly Ruth. I'm not winning any beauty pageants anytime soon, but because of something, right? Like I get to have audience with the king, right? Or Nehemiah as well, right? So these people who, because of what God has sort of given them, have access to people in the house of power, and then be able to affect big change, right? So we all know the story of Ruth, we know Nehemiah building the wall, also Ezra as well. So I feel like in that sense, yes, I'm not winning any beauty pageants, but again, God has people influencing there. So when you sort of get depressed, sometimes looking at the news, it's like, this country is in shambles. It's like, no, God has His plan and His people in places all over the world. And then lay ministry has been something that has been of interest to me. So myself, I spent actually a year on staff at the university, and that was a pretty amazing time. And I had a juncture in my life where I was asking God, because I got into medical school, like, should I go to medical school or should I be a minister? And that was, again, a very hard decision, because my whole life, my parents was like, no, Jimmy, you'll become a doctor. So the first step to become a doctor is obviously go to medical school. But then I was really fighting a lot of whether I was going to medical school for filial piety, to sort of honor my parents, whether it's something that I was sort of, just running after that to not create any problems. And I was having such an amazing time in ministry of what was the path. And throughout my interviews, when I was going on medical school, I sort of made a point to talk to all the Christian leaders and these places, and they so what has God been doing in this campus, and what has that sort of opened for you? And I hear place after place. For example, at University of Michigan, this lady says, who was a pediatrician, going to a lot of closed countries. So back then, it's still very hard to get into communist countries, with entire suitcases of Bibles, right? And they didn't even stock them, right? So, or people going into sort of rural parts of Africa, and God opening doors. And that was when I sort of really thought, this medical training could open doors that otherwise me being in ministry couldn't, and decided to sort of pursue that path. And God truly has sort of used that. I didn't become a doctor, as you know, but even that even getting those degrees has been sort of opening doors that I didn't think that would be open there at my university. And then I talked about the last three. You've already heard a little bit about rare genomics, and basically I think there's more and more Christians all over the world with this sort of idea of entrepreneurship in Silicon Valley, but to think about how can we create gospel-driven, Christ-motivated ventures. So a lot of, it's very sexy these days to think about triple bottom line, right? You're not only helping people, you're money, you're making profit, but also you're helping the environment. But how can we build companies and organizations with Christ at the center? And there's a lot of groups that are being started in amazing ways. And again, be encouraged. And Rare Genomics is one of many there. And then there's the big picture is not only can we think about influencing our fields, the influence our fields, but imagine transforming your entire discipline. And many people have. I am not one of them, but I'll give you some example, right? So, for example, J.S. Bach, right? Everybody here, right? But Bach created his music for the worship of God, right? The aim and final end of all music should be none other than the glory of God and the refreshment of the soul, right? He was so good at his trade, right, that he transformed it, right? So Bach loved God so much that the music, so everything that's in Bach, he would worship. Or someone like Kepler, I don't know, very famous for not only sort of planetary motion, laws of physics, but him too he's doing all this to sort of see God's beautiful handiwork. I won't sort of read that quote there, and again transforming the field. Or Isaac Newton, not only famous for falling apples and inventing calculus for the sake of for fun, so he can do physics. But he wrote more about theology than he did about science. I don't know if you know that, right? So there's ways that you can reimagine. A lot of these disciplines, all disciplines come from God. All knowledge comes from God. But unfortunately, a lot of these, whether it's science, whether it's politics, has been sort of, God has been taken away. And there are a lot of people sort of thinking, Christians, and figuring out how to think about God being centered. For example, philosophy, Alan Plantinga, I don't know if you people know, right? Christian ideas and philosophy is now sort of become more vibrant. So the entire field can be transformed there. And ultimately, I think, I want to think about the everyday, right? And that's sort of most important. So I'm part of Natera. These are cheesy pictures, but most of my day is sitting in front of computers and equations, and how do you worship God in that context? And truly, you can do a lot. In an entrepreneurial environment, it's very cutthroat, and it's now actually it's more and more sexy to people thinking about like culture, like Netflix, we want to build culture, like Zappos, but that actually is not new, right? Us learning from the Bible to treat people and love them in our companies, it has been central, and not, or even the idea of not taking all the grain, leaving some for the poor, and all those are ideas about work that has been around since the Old Testament, that we can run companies differently, and so that's a lot of sort of in my day-to-day, thinking about in my times of frustration, in my times of anger, things are not being done, or we're late in schedule. So think about, ultimately my master is Christ, and how do I love my people, my staff, my peers, and ultimately, we care ultimately for God's glory at the end. So this is something I said at the end, and I'll end with sort of Colossians. The Corinthians verse and the Colossians verse is also very helpful as we think about everything that we do, right? In word and in deed, right? For the glory of God, or everything we do for the name of Christ. And I challenge, when I teach Sunday school to kids, to think about how they do everything in the name of Christ, Can you wake up in the name of Christ, glorifying God? Like, or, oh, wow, look at this. I live another day, thanks be to God, right? Can you brush your teeth to the glory of God? I didn't brush my teeth, right? I'm like, wow, look at this. God has someone invented toothpaste and a toothbrush, and I can actually afford it, and I can actually have running water. Like, whoa, God is so awesome, right? But I do that to the kids in Sunday school, but I would challenge for adults here is, how can every aspect of your work be done for the glory of God in the name of Christ? So that's sort of a brief view of what God has done, and I'm just sort of really honored to sort of be in the presence of people who are giving up so much for Taiwan and their work, and hopefully that this could be encouraging to you to see how God has been using me and others and